Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Om Karnikam, your host on Space to Ground, a podcast by Remo Space Systems. Before we jump into the series of episodes, I would like to mention a brief introduction to the Remo Space Systems. Remo Space is a company setting new standards in the satellite ground station technology and business, known for their pioneering work in the satellite ground station market, including the state of art antenna systems, high speed data downlink capabilities, and advanced telemetry tracking and command services. Ramos Space is making significant stride in the new space sector. Their innovative products such as next generation ground station and seamless communication networks are designed to meet the evolving needs of new space applications demand. In fact, their products are designed to support a wide range of satellite missions, including Earth observation, satellite communication, primarily ensuring and reliable and efficient communication between satellites and ground station. Having such a unique value proposition in the ground station market, this podcast by Space is meant to drive more awareness, explore new technologies, and help the industry navigate collaborative opportunities. As you dive deeply into our upcoming episodes, we are sure you will take away some of the finest key pointers on the ground station business. So stay tuned and subscribe to our podcast for the latest updates. Enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to episode 5, the future of SATCOM and new space role in shaping global communications. Previously, we have discussed in the episodes about the remote space systems and the kind of, I would say, a complete outlook on the ground stations as well as from the upstream market too. But today we'll be taking a little more broader view on the satellite communications, both on the upstream and the middle value chain of the market. And without any delay, I would like to welcome on board Candace Johnson. Hi, Candace. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time. I know the industry has been quite busy, so it takes we are taking your precious time in between, and I'm glad to have you on the podcast as I'm looking forward to very much insightful conversation as you have more than 4 decades of experience in this industry. So before we take a deep dive into the topic, can you provide us a brief outlook on your journey in this industry?
So I always tell everybody that I've used space to first provide universal access, whether that be for satellite television, satellite telecommunications, satellite mobile, satellite internet, um, launchers, to then accessing the universe with Earth observation, with meteorological satellites, with sensors for space situational awareness, etc. To now, I am focusing on networks for the universe. So using space and providing logistics, data centers, transport, communications to combine what I call deep space, which we now can do thanks to the James Webb Telescope, to then with near space and then also the planet, so that we have one space.
Interesting. And I would say right now I would like to take a direct jump into the topic now, as you have mentioned quite a long, I would say, aspects of the industry. So, how is new space technology transforming the satcom industry, and what unique innovations are leading the way? As you mentioned that about the James Webb Telescope and all. So, I believe these innovations somewhere push the boundaries and help us kind of find more technologies which can be utilized for the consumer market too on the terrestrial domain. So from that perspective, how do you think the satcom has evolved and how it is providing innovation to lead the path ahead?
Well, first of all, it's so funny because people talk about new space, and I have been doing new space, which is, commercially oriented, privately
Yeah.
financed space all of my life. In fact, I have never done a government project. So everything that I have done has been entrepreneurial, has been the initiative of a private person and also then privately financed and always market oriented. So you can say I've been doing new space for the last 45 years. There are some things, though, that I do see that stay the same. I always tell everybody, it's the bang for the buck, and it is defying or using gravity. And so, with satellite communication, so being able to provide universal access, I am one of the founders of SES, the world's largest satellite system. And I was on the founding team of Iridium. And so, and that was already in 1994 with Iridium and 1983 with SES. And so I think it's important to realize that, we have broadband satellites and we have narrowband satellites. And we also now have the MEO, the Middle Earth Orbit satellites. And we should try and make certain to use all of these orbits and all of these different satellite systems. Um, the it's not so much the space, the satellite buses that have changed. It is very often the terminals that have improved. Let me give you an example. When we first started with SES to provide direct to home satellite television in 1983, the European Space Agency in Europe were doing high powered satellites. And so these were 250-watt traveling wave tubes or 110 traveling wave tubes. What they didn't recognize was that in Japan, gallium arsenide LNBs were being produced, and they had a 10 times improvement in the performance. So we at SES, at Astra, we said we don't need 250-watt traveling wave tubes. We don't need 110 traveling wave tubes. All we need is 25-watt traveling wave tubes, and because we will use these terminals with gallium arsenide LNBs. And nobody believed us until, of course, we did it. And then they said, you're absolutely right. So it was really the innovation in the ground segment. Same thing with Iridium. 1994, we launched it in 1998. Um, uh, the the architecture for Starlink, for OneWeb, for Kuiper, all of them are the same architecture of Iridium. So Iridium really is the precursor. What has changed? Again, it is really the the ground segment. So the ground segment is now being, it's now being, shall we say, it has improved so that the terminals, normal terminals, 5G telephones, paging can receive and transmit to these low Earth orbit satellite systems. Now, people forget, but when we did launch Iridium, we already were sending pages to the terminals to be able to then tell the people you have a telephone, so come up through the ground, or come up through the basement, whatever. So I think that as we go forward with the digital transformation, we will be, and compressed and miniaturization of signals, we will be seeing more and more innovative uses of existing infrastructure that will make a better world, for our planet.
That's quite interesting, I would say. And just taking a step ahead, I would say, what impact are large satellite constellations powered by new space expected to have on global communication, especially in underserved region, maybe remote regions, or the people where I think the accessibility is less for them?
Well, when I was first starting, And I received this little toy Sputnik when I was 5 years old to put on the satellite, which was on the Christmas tree, which was in 1957. And so I was convinced from then on that everything good came from space, and I still believe that. So at the beginning, all of the regions of the world were underserved. And so certainly, Europe was underserved for satellite television, and many parts of the world were underserved for mobile. I also started Europe Online. It was the world's first broadband internet satellite system. So, all of the regions are underserved. And you looked at the United States, and I was just there, and I was appalled, really, to see the mobile telecommunications service, because it was non-existent in so many places where one would have thought it would have been existent. So, there are many ways to skin a cat. So, 12 years ago, I was one of the founders of Pacific. I put together a wonderful group of women, Oceania Women's Network Satellite, and OwnSat. And we were one of the first investors in Pacific. And Pacific brings high throughput broadband internet to the Oceania, to the islands in the Pacific. And we do this with very, very focused Ka band beams onto each of those island nations. And the quality is superb, it's very resilient, it is 100% reliable. And we also have combined that with ground segments in those regions so that you don't have various hops. You just go directly from, whether it's the Philippines, whether it is Indonesia, etc., to the satellite system. Now, of course, we also have in Africa, we are seeing Starlink, which is coming forward, and and that is fine. Um, as long as, and this is one thing I do kind of feel very strongly about, is that you know the way the ITU works is that a nation has to ask for frequencies from the ITU. And I think it's very important in this day, when we realize that so many nations need to have satellite communications, be it for perhaps other reasons than internet or telephony. Maybe they want to do, Earth observation. Maybe they want to do border control, etc. And so it is very important that the sovereignty of the nations that is on the receiving end of these global low Earth orbit satellite systems, that they are in agreement, and that there is enough frequencies left for them to also have their systems.
So that's quite interesting that you mentioned about the low Earth orbit operators. So I'd like to actually for us, ask you this follow up question. I would say on the same lines. So what I would say, I would like to frame it not from what actually. So uh, the kind of regulatory aspects that we are seeing in the industry now. So as a new space, companies drive SATCOM advancement the way I think OneWeb, Starlink, and everyone is going. So what are the key challenges in terms of regulatory frameworks and orbital management, especially for the LEO satellite operators?
So, I never like to do things twice. So, 6 years ago, when a friend of mine called me up and said, Candice, I'm going to start a space based space situational awareness system called North Star. I said, okay, this is something that I would be interested in. It's like when we first had cars on the roads. Everybody just drove, wherever they wanted to, however they wanted to, however fast they wanted to, etc. And then traffic rules needed to be put in place. And so I think that, the ITU really has done an amazing job of being a neutral platform for satellite constellations and satellites to coordinate amongst themselves from a technological and technology point of view and technical point of view, so that they don't collide with each other, that their signals do not collide with each other, etc. So I think we can base, all of our going forward on the rules of the road, that the ITU has set out. I do not think that we need to have new rules of the road. We can use new technologies such as space situational awareness to say, there is this intended or unintended object that could possibly be harming you, and then asking that person, to move. So the the shall we say, the collegiality and the codes of conduct that have existed in space for now, ever since, what, 67 years. I think that we just need to make certain and respect them. I don't think we need to have new regulation. I've always said regulation never stopped anything good from happening.
Yeah.
So, so I don't think we need to have new regulation, but we need to base our conduct on the rules of the road that exist, and to also remember, just like the ocean, that space is not a limited, it is not an unlimited resource, and that we can open up through new technologies, we can open up new bands, etc. But um, we must be respectful for all nations.
So, I think you have covered most of the critical aspects of the regulatory field, because I believe that is a kind of a tricky thing as well. But a lot of times, I would say it is also very helpful. Like, we had the CEO of Astral into Space Technologies from Ecuador, and he mentioned to us that in Ecuador, the regulatory body who is handling the space related things have been very helpful. They have been encouraging. So, my myth about that, when it comes to regulations, there are complications that broke off actually.
No, but that's why I say regulations never stopped anything.
Yes.
But they when I first started SES, in 1983, the Luxembourg government, who had no knowledge whatsoever about space, they were very, very helpful. And just like Ecuador and, with Astralintu, is that all of these economies and societies and countries realize that space can provide huge advantages for their country and for their economies. And so they are very anxious and desiring to use their sovereign right to use those frequencies for what they need. And so, the and so my plea to everyone is, you must be respectful of other people's needs. And fine that we're having all of these um, constellations of thousands of satellites, one, if they respect the rules of the road. I also, being a techie, uh, and we come back to what I said at the beginning. All different orbits are fine. You know, it's different strokes for different folks. In one area, a broadband satellite internet service in the Ka band can be much, much more effective and dependable and resilient than a low Earth orbit satellite system, even with hundreds of thousands of satellites in a country where the people would have to be depending on this shared bandwidth. GEOs do dedicated bandwidth, LEOs do shared bandwidth. And so this is something that people have to understand when they have their service level agreements.
Absolutely. And, I mean, as we have discussed these many aspects of the new space with respect to SATCOM, this is the final part of the episode that I would come to. Looking ahead, what trends and developments should we watch for as, new space shapes the future of SATCOM and global connectivity from your perspective?
Well, first of all, I think that we should look at not only multi orbits but multi orbit interoperability. So, here again, if the low Earth orbit satellites are really not so efficient, because it's a very inefficient use of bandwidth, to be honest, then they can cooperate with geostationary satellites to have more bandwidth when they need it. So, this I think the multi orbit interoperability is very, very important. Um, I think that the if we're talking about satellite communications, I mean, one of the things that I am very, very interested in, for instance, if we are going to be going to Mars, is how are we going to communicate, with the people in Mars? And so, we're going to have to be using digital twins. We're going to be having to use the metaverse, to be able to have real time communication or simulated real-time communication, with those people. I also, I'm very big on it's not so much on communications, but in a way it is. I think that I think space-based solar power is something that can really help our world, because if we get it right, we could do, 20% of the world's needs for electricity in 2040. Now that's exciting. And we must also, look at the data centers. I mean, the data centers that are being used, today for AI, and in particular for generative AI, are using huge amounts of electricity. So, how are we going to be able to feed all of this need for data centers? And so certainly data centers in the moon, which are also can be very secure, are very interesting. Um, the the rise of quantum. I am very, very involved in quantum now, because I believe that it can take off the load, this heavy load of the data centers, if we get it right for the AI. Certainly I do see uh, uh, I see a proliferation of of space stations, of spaceships. This cannot be the domain of just one country or two countries. And so I'm always, going around and inspiring young people to do their own satellites, do their own rockets, do their own, space stations, do their own spaceships, do their own HAPS. It is not just one um, one solution, but as I say, many solutions that can fit many different needs. And I also think that there's one interesting trend, which is that we talk about new space. I talk about one space, but we're also talking about fast space. So increasingly, more and more people are, we need to have connectivity via space quicker than the way it's happening now. And so, if we can have, there's a lot of there's these companies called Lean Space, or who are really saying that the United States Department of Defense is working on getting satellite systems and launchers to be ready in 24 hours. So we have to think about that too. And of course, since I did just mention defense, we are entering a world where dual use will be very important. I'm also, I think that the people sometimes think that geo satellites, everybody's talking about leos and forget geos. Actually, I'm a very, very big fan of geos, in case you haven't noticed. And I also think that everything in space, so refueling in space, manufacturing in space, I can see those geo satellites being outfitted with new payloads, to do new applications that they were not originally thought for, but just use that wonderful infrastructure that's already there, etc., to build new payloads, whether it be for space exploration, going one way, whether it be if you're a telecoms company, looking down and doing Earth observation or weather. There are so many opportunities for us to use space in a peaceful way and to make certain that it serves our world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you have mentioned, the aspect not only from the SATCOM industry, but other things as well. I completely agree with you. I think the way things are going, and I'm really hopeful in the coming years, we might see more and more, innovation towards this side. And I believe, as people like you, as the leaders, who are leading this thing, not only as person who are advising, but also are trying to take consistent participant in participating in this kind of events and the innovations that are happening. So yeah, thank you very much again, Candice, for wonderful insights on this topic. And I'll keep you posted once this podcast is published. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. It's been delightful to speak with you.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode. If you'd like to know more about Ramos Space Systems, their products, and their presence in the new space market, then log on to www.ramosspace.com. Subscribe to our podcast for latest updates and stay tuned for the next episodes. Thank you very much.